Hi, hello. Welcome and thank you all for coming. My name is Dr. Danelle Dykoff, and I am the director of the first year writing program here at Cal State L.A. And I really just could not be more excited about this community seminar. So today we're bringing together, I'm sorry, here. Am I still recording okay?
Yeah,
okay.
You're good.
Okay, sorry. Today we're bringing together 11 sections of our English 1005A courses to talk about the work that we did over this past semester as part of our collective efforts to get out the vote. And we know that it worked, right? We had a record turnout of voting in this year's election, 160 million people, that's 67% of eligible voters cast their ballots. And we know that the youth played a really major active role in the civic engagement milestone. So the students who will be presenting here today were part of that history. And those of you in the audience today who worked all semester long on these voter projects were also part of that history. So I wanted to talk a little bit about just how important our students were really to this initiative. I've been teaching first year writing courses for over a decade. And year after year, I am just so inspired and so impressed and really humbled by the work that our first year students are capable of producing. You all have such powerful creative vision, and the experiences and the perspectives that you bring into our first year writing classroom is just so important. Like, we as a university need you, all of your unique talents and skills and knowledges that you contribute. And I am a really firm believer that we need to create more spaces for our first year students to make their voices heard. Okay, so like more publication outlets, more interaction with the community, and more events like this. And that, for me as the director of first year writing, was really one of the driving forces behind this year's Get Out the Vote campaign. So I want to really just thank you all for contributing to this important historical initiative. We have presentations today by 8 students who were elected by their classmates to represent their section of college writing. And they'll be talking a little bit about their creative process before sharing their work. And then after the presentations, we are so very fortunate to have with us 2 distinguished guests, author and activist Luis Rodriguez, who is the author of this year's Cal State L.A. One Campus, One Book, Always Running, and Dr. Melvin Donaldson, who is a published poet, a short story writer, and an essayist, and who is also one of our professors in the English department. And as I understand it, a longtime friend of Mr. Rodriguez. So before we begin the presentations, I'm going to hand it over to my esteemed colleague, Professor Jenny Hicks, so she can say a few words of welcome. Professor Hicks, you should know, was really instrumental in organizing this Get Out the Vote campaign. This initiative really was her brainchild. So let's extend her a warm welcome and a very big thank you for all of her visionary work.
Thank you so much. And I don't have much to say except thank you all for being here. I am so proud of all of my students, even if you aren't presenting. I saw amazing work this semester, both in the videos and the essays. I'm really thankful for Danelle's support in this and all of the TAs who worked on this. I couldn't be happier with what ended up happening. And I really want to put a special thank you out there for the library and the librarians who are with us today and who have been instrumental every step of the way in this. We just couldn't have done any of this without you. And of course, our special guest, who I'll have some more remarks about later. But I really want to see the student work. So let's get on to that.
Okay, and so first up, we have Karen, who will be presenting her video. Karen, are you able to join us?
Yeah, I'm right here. I have to share it, right?
Well, if there's anything you want to say about your video, and then your professor will actually be sharing your video on your behalf.
Yeah. Got it. Hi, I'm Karen. My professor is Michael Reyes. This video kind of inspired me because my little sister was basically confused of the elections this year. She didn't know anything about it. So since she can't vote basically because she's a minor, I decided to make a video for all those younger generations to know and help out, to have their voices heard and have others be inspired to go out and vote. This year's election was very crazy. So yeah, that's what basically what inspired me was my little sister and the little young generations. Yeah.
Karen.
And I'll add a
Professor
few
Reyes.
words to that. Yeah, I'll add a few words to that. First of all, congratulations, Karen. I'm Professor Michael Reyes, everyone. Hello, welcome. And it is my honor to present to you all Karen Arvisous' voter turnout video, which was selected specifically by her classmates in our section of English 1005A. And like Karen mentioned, this video speaks specifically to the demographic of young people who are almost eligible to vote. And she makes us consider that it's never too early to get informed and to get involved and to begin thinking about the voting process. So the video is very unique, and I will play it for you all now. Just a second, everyone. Seems like I'm not being allowed to share my screen for some reason.
You should be able to. Yeah, we see it.
All right, and if there's any issues with audio, please let me know. All right, and here is Karen's video.
Wait. Are you registered to vote?
No, I'm 13.
Well, it's never too early to learn about voting. Let me teach you. Starting with October, on the 19th is when your registering to vote comes to an end. Now, on the 5th, which is on a Monday, is when the early voting period begins. On to November. Election day is always a Tuesday, next after the first Monday. In other words, the very first Tuesday on November. November 2nd closes up the early voting period. No worries if you're late until registering or voting. You can still register and vote on the same day as the election day. You're probably wondering, who can or can't vote? I can help answer that. Those who can vote have to be a citizen of the United States. You also have to be 18 years or older. If you're on a parole for conviction of felony, obviously you can't vote. Lastly, you can't be mentally incompetent to vote by court. Can't forget about your voting rights. Coming in at number 1, if polls are being closed and you're still waiting in line, you are entitled to vote. Next up, if you made a mistake on your ballot, all you could do is just simply ask for a new one. You sad about your machine not working? Again, just simply ask for a paper ballot. What if they tell you your name isn't listed? Well, if your name isn't listed, you're still entitled to receive a ballot. Soon after the elections, the elected officials will make sure you're registered and qualified. If you passed, your ballot will be counted. Now do you get it?
Yep, I got it.
Great! Now that you learn about voting, go out and inspire those around you that can vote to let their voices be heard.
Okay, great. Will do. Thank you.
All right, thank you all for your attention, and congrats, Karen.
Thank you, Professor.
So I think next up is my student, Ashley. And I'm really excited about this because Ashley was actually the first of the Get Out the Vote videos that I saw. And I was like, whoa, I can't believe these kids are doing this stuff. And actually, the thing I want to share about Ashley's video is the day that I went to go and drop my vote in, my ballot in the little ballot box down the street from me, I actually had her video because she uses repetition to make a point in her video, you know, which is something I love to see people do in writing, but I had her video in my head, like a song stuck in my head. And so when I dropped off my ballot, I was thinking about Ashley and her video. I also want to say shout out to Ashley that she actually entered her video in the American Communities Program contest and tied for third. So she's an award winner and an amazing student. So I will turn it over to Ashley to present her video.
Thank you, Professor. Something about my video that I just wanted to say was that something that kind of inspired me about it was that it's my first year voting. I just turned 18. So I wanted to inspire like other people as well to be able to vote and just to get out there and get their voices heard. So I'm going to share my video. Okay. Why should you vote? What a simple question, you might think, but let me break it down for you. Why should you vote? Because a trip to the hospital shouldn't break the bank. Americans shouldn't be paying $2.8 trillion on healthcare annually. Why should you vote? Because equality isn't always equal. Because people should be free to be whoever they choose. Why should you vote? Because the world as we know it might not be the way it once was. Pollution storms our air, and the plastic in the ocean is too much not to care. Why should you vote? Because we should all have access to an equal education system. Because student loan debt shouldn't be this high. Why should you vote? Because lines shouldn't separate families. Are you registered to vote? Okay, and that was my video.
Thank you, Ashley and Professor Hicks. Next up, we have Cindy. If you'd like to say a few words about your video, and Professor Alonso.
Hi, my name is Cindy. I'm going to do a really quick presentation about my project. Okay, so hi, my name is Cindy Gomez, and I'm going to present my voter turnout presentation. So the basis of this project was to research on a population that had a low voter turnout. So for this, I realized the Hispanic community faced a lot of barriers when trying to vote, like discrimination, poverty, lack of representation. So these things have affected us greatly and have caused politicians to disregard our opinions. So I thought of possible solutions that we could implement that could benefit us greatly when we vote. So the key takeaways of this project are the importance of youth activism. It's very inspiring and motivational. Seeing people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez who have accomplished so much at her age is inspiring to many, including myself. She is a perfect example of youth in politics. She motivates people and she helps people strive for a place in politics. It also, having youth in politics provides a different problem-solving perspective So you have fresh minds. You don't always have the same people making decisions for everyone that may not benefit everyone. So yeah. So what particular audience I was trying to appeal to? I was mostly trying to appeal to young teens and young adults because we're the future. Teens and young adults have a lot of access to technology to which they can help inform their parents about voter policies and other stuff like that, current events that are happening in the future. So yeah, this is, sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to say a few words about Cindy Gomez, who's my student in the classroom. Welcome, and thank you, Cindy, for representing our class. My name is Luis Alonso, and I am her professor. This is such a great presentation that you just gave. And I'd also like to thank your peers in your class for making the classroom a great experience. And Cindy has done a terrific job throughout the semester, putting effort in her work. And in her video project, the word that comes to mind is community. In her video project, she interviews people in her community and they give their thoughts on the importance of voting and the importance of voting in this current election. So that's all I'm going to say, and I'll let her play the video since she's already sharing the screen. Thank you, Cindy.
Can you hear the sound?
And I want to encourage you to vote because it is important for a future, especially to the youth. There is a very low turnout. Your voice does matter. Go out and vote. Our future depends on it. Please, please do so. You may think that your vote does not count, but it does. It can make a big difference, especially young people. Please vote.
I believe voting is important because we can vote for somebody that share the same ideas or beliefs as us, and we can count on them to do stuff that we agree with rather than somebody who's the complete opposite of us.
Voting is a constitutional right that we must exercise. It is extremely important to vote because through voting we get representation. As a Latino male, I like to vote for people or for officials that are going to represent me or are going to do something beneficial for my community and for the overall well-being of the citizens of the U.S. Voting is a right that we all should take advantage of.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cindy. Next up, we have Deborah Gonzalez and Professor Castillo.
Hello, can you guys hear me? Yeah, okay. Hello, my name is Deborah. Something that inspired me to do this video was my family, since they aren't able to vote, and me being the first to do so, I chose to do a silent animation film. Since you really don't hear about those, so I just wanted to give my purpose was to just give a message very clear. I just wanted it to be very straightforward, and yeah.
Thank you, Deborah. My name is Liza Castillo, and I'm very honored to have been Deborah's instructor for this during these strange and difficult times that we're in. And I don't think I would have enough words to describe really the incredible journey Deborah has undertaken through this semester. Resilience, dedication, and sincerity are, I think, good starting places for describing Deborah. And her project today really demonstrates the power of art to be able to communicate information that really can be often very baffling to the best of us. And her decision to focus on the visual and to forego sound is such a bold choice, but one that really emphasizes the beauty of her own created images. And from the soundlessness comes her own voice and her call for us to act. And so without further ado, this is Deborah's video for Proposition 22. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Deborah.
Thank you, Deborah. Next up, we have Elaine Latona, who is a student of Professor Mary Pace. And unfortunately, Professor Pace is not able to join us. She works at this time as a teacher with LAUSD. So she asked me to say a few words on her behalf. So Professor Pace says, "Hello, everyone. I wish I was here to present Elaine Latona's video that she submitted for our class's first assignment called Voter Turnout Video and Essay Project. It is an honor to have seen Elaine's development in class, and as you will see, although this was her very first major assignment submission, her work demonstrates compelling, creative, and active voice when addressing the challenges and barriers facing communities with historically low voter turnout, all the while informing and motivating her chosen population to vote. Elaine's work demonstrates the power of individual voice to affect change in one's community and how each person is empowered by the digital tools available to have their voices be heard. Without further ado, here's Elaine's video, Voter Turnout Project." And Elaine, if you want to say a few words about your project, I'm happy to play your video, or you can if you have it loaded.
Hi, my name is Elaine, and for my project, my attended audience was youth, usually the ages of 18 to 25, due to historically being a low voter turnout until now. For my video, it was scripted, but I improvised because before doing the video, I was on social media and I read a post about, I can't specifically remember now, about how people keep publicizing, certain things of supporting other groups. And I read a comment on how some people just jump on the bandwagon and don't actually do what they're saying. So that's what I focused on during this video. And I forgot the script and I just focused on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine. And then I will go ahead and share my screen and play your video.
Hi, my name is Elaine, and if you're in the community of the ages of 18 to 29, we need to take action. As a young adult myself at 19, I understand some of us have always complained that the immigration needs to get better, that racial issues need to be addressed, that the justice system needs to be changed, but we say all these things every time, but due to statistics and demographics, we are not voting, we're not registering to vote, and we are not taking action for these changes. And I believe that needs change. I believe that we should be able to register to vote for these changes and not just saying them. We need to take action. We need to apply ourselves, not just allowing other people to do it, because if we just allow other people to do this, we can, or we would not win what we want. So we need to take action ourselves for our needs and our wants. We need to do that ourselves. Thank you and have a nice day.
Thank you so much, Elaine. So next up, we have Charlize Molina and Professor Hicks.
Sorry, got some sun in my face. So Charlize was actually the first of my students that I met because she emailed me before the semester even started. And I got to know her, and I'm just so thankful to have had her as a student in my class. Her presentation is going to be a little different because she's doing a PowerPoint and not a video. And this is for our third writing project in my class, was really about problem solving and community action, topics that we're going to pick up later. And she worked on this really hard. And for people who think that undergraduates or first year writing students can't do research or can't write, then Charlize is here to prove you wrong about that. So I will turn it over to her.
Thank you, Professor. So, okay, I'm going to share my screen now. Okay, so hold on. Are you guys able to see the presentation? Okay, so well, hello, my name is Charlize Molina, and today I will be presenting my essay regarding wrongful convictions and factors that prevent people of color from losing their rights, such as voting. So what is a wrongful conviction and who is greatly affected? So the definition kind of lies within itself, but to put it briefly, a wrongful conviction is when an innocent individual is wrongfully convicted of a crime. And this is something that disproportionately affects minorities. Specifically, it affects the lives of many Black and Hispanic men. And statistics that support my claim that Black and Hispanic men are mainly affected by this, according to NY Times and the Innocence Project, is that 50% of Black men and 40% of non-fluent Hispanic men are wrongfully convicted by the police. And not only that, but Black defendants account for 40% of convicted crimes, but 50% of those are wrongfully convicted, while whites only account for 36%. Michigan law debates that exonerations of Black murder defendants take longer than exonerations of white murder defendants. Murder defendants and official misconduct is more common in murder convictions that lead to exonerations of Black defendants than in those with white defendants. And this just proves that the racial ethnic group that an individual may belong to matters more than actually wrongfully convicting them for a crime they didn't even commit. So where does this stem from? This all stems from racism. Internalized racism and racial profiling play a huge role in wrongful convictions. Prisonpolicy.org states that Black residents in New York City were 8 times more likely to be stopped by the police than white residents, and 11 more times more likely to be frisked. Another claim was that the New York City police reported using force in 23% of stops of Black and Latino residents, but in only 16% of stops of white residents. Nation.com concluded that based on information from more than 2 million 911 calls in 2 US cities, more than white officers dispatched to Black neighborhoods fired their guns 5 times as often as Black officers dispatched for calls to the same neighborhoods. This is a hate crime, and officers like to use stereotypes to justify their discriminatory behavior and violence against minority groups. And the fact that they have excuses for their behavior is triggering, and it casts their privilege because they will most likely not be held accountable. How does this affect the individuals who are wrongfully convicted? Well, these individuals may become dissociated from society, developmental problems like depression, anxiety, panic disorders, paranoia, and drug addictions. Since they are stripped away from their freedom and of everything they once knew, they lose trust in everyone and turn to substances for support. What can be done? Well, for one, better eyewitness identification. This is the most important because as cron.com states, 85% of wrongful convictions in Texas alone are due to mistaken eyewitness identifications. And this is the #1 cause of wrongful convictions in the nation. The Innocence Project has actually created a series of steps that are quite helpful that can help reduce this exact problem. Conducting a double-blind procedure is most effective so that neither the victim nor administrator can influence each other's decisions. Confidence statements are also an idea that they have discussed. In a lineup procedure, the eyewitness should provide a statement in their own words that demonstrates the level of confidence that they have in the identification that's being made. This will lessen the number of wrongful convictions and strengthen the number of deserving arrests. It should be legal for interrogations to be recorded so that false confessions and coercion can be reduced. And I know that they are recorded, but it's very common for officers to tamper with evidence and video recordings. So I feel like there should be stricter laws that can help prevent coercions and verbal as well as physical abuse against innocent individuals. The Innocence Project has stated that more than 360 wrongful convictions overturned by DNA evidence involve some form of false confession. Recording the interrogation would improve clarity and create an accurate account of what happened during this interrogation. And if the system is not reformed, then we would risk innocent people's lives, and we are left with a corrupt criminal justice system. What is at stake? So people's lives are at stake. Our criminal justice system needs to be reformed so that innocent people do not pay the price of someone else's mistakes. These people have families, they have children that need help in finding themselves in this world. And when these children grow up without their parents because of the inconsistencies in the justice system, then they will feel like they cannot succeed because the system isn't fair and is out to get them. Wrongful conviction is more than just a mistake because while officers don't lose anything, these innocent people are stripped from their freedom and from their families. They are left with nothing but their thoughts. Not only do they experience loneliness, but being wrongfully convicted may cause someone long-term emotional and mental trauma. And we cannot rest until the criminal justice system can recognize their faults and implement change. Lastly, this is so important to me because my own father was constantly stopped and arrested for no other reason than the fact that he was bald, brown, and he had many tattoos. And I had to witness this at a very young age. And I would frequently fall asleep not knowing where they took my dad or how he was doing. And in my opinion, most like white people and members of dominant groups have done so much damage to people of color. But yet they have the nerve to act on instinct because they're scared. And I just feel like we are scared because we have no other choice than to live in the skin we have, and we are constantly being marginalized for it. I feel like this is terrifying, and it's definitely time to use our voices and work together to end this cycle of suffering for all of our people. And here are my references. Thank you. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you so much, Charlize, for that powerful research and for the depth of your scholarship on this important topic. Next up, we have Daniela Rodriguez and Professor Rob.
So Daniela, do you want to say a few things first and then I'll present your video?
Yes. So first of all, I want to thank my professor. I feel like she's really helped me gain a lot of knowledge throughout this course. So this is why I really want to thank her, because I feel like I haven't really had another teacher who's really given us that chance to like speak up on like important topics like this. So I made a short video. I mean, it's short, but I feel like I really reached the goal that I wanted to reach. My target audience would be the Latinx community, most importantly the field workers who are out in the sun during the virus, the hot weather. And I just feel like it's important for us to like raise awareness, whether it's reposting things on social media, whether it's to just educate each other. And I feel good after making this video. Since I turned 18, so I had the chance to vote, and I just feel really good about it. Thank you, Professor Rob.
Well, thank you, Daniela, for sharing this video and representing our class and representing the work that you've done in our class. What I really appreciated about Daniela's video and why I reached out to her to present this video, it is short. I think it's maybe like 25 seconds, but the idea in the video and the idea that she discusses when she wrote her essay about the video really kind of pertains to a lot of work that we've been doing throughout the semester. The theme of the course, is this idea of get out the vote, but we've been learning what that means on a larger scale. And it's not just citizenship for those that are actual, identified as citizens. It's this sense of being a citizen of a community and being able to advocate for those within your community and whatever that version of community looks like. And today we discussed in class, this concept of to citizen and using citizen as a verb. And I think that Daniela's video here really kind of amplifies that sense of, setting aside citizenship as a privileged term and understanding it as a privilege and being able to speak for those that can't do things like vote, or those that don't have the capacity or the access to being able to speak out loud and being able to use a voice for them. So I'm really proud of the work that she did for this first assignment, and I'm proud of the work that she is continuing to do in this class. So let me share my screen and pull up this video. All right, you guys can all see it. All right, so thank you again, Daniela. I really appreciate all your work.
Thank you.
And thank you, Daniela and Professor Rob. Next up, we have Chantel Williams and Professor Galindo.
Hello. For my project, I was asked to think about the various population of underrepresented voters and try to make something to help them get out and vote. And I chose a Latinx and Hispanic community. They stood out to me because they had a really low turnout rate from 20 to 50% for like the past 30 or more years. And for my video, I had the idea to ask a few of my Hispanic friends to read out a script that I wrote. I figured it would be better to see other Hispanic people tell someone who's Hispanic to vote rather than someone who's not. because seeing someone who looks like you and relate to you can inspire you to do something a little bit better. I'm very much a fan of like minimalism and stuff, so I chose for the video to be short and straight to the point. I didn't add any music or pictures in the video because it would be unnecessary or like distracting from the main point. And I considered adding Spanish subtitles, but I'm not at all qualified, and I didn't feel like asking my friends for help with that. But I don't know, I feel like I did my best work. And thank you to my professor for picking me and reaching out to me, or my class. And yeah, thank you.
All right, before sharing Chantal's video, I just want to say, first, congratulate her on all the great work that she's been doing. It's been a really great honor to watch her grow throughout the semester. Every project, I look forward to reading her work. And this video just demonstrates just a small portion of her talent. And I would really just like to thank her and the rest of the presenters and the rest of the 1005A classes for showcasing the power of individual voices and for just sharing their work with us and being here today. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and show her video. Okay. So
the Hispanic and Latinx community have historically the lowest voting turnout rate,
which doesn't really make sense considering we make up the majority of the US population.
Every
voice
matters.
It's important for us to represent not only ourselves, but our families.
Our great-grandparents and even some of our grandparents didn't have the right to vote. There are people in our community
right now
that don't have the opportunity to vote and don't have a voice.
So we must use the voices we do have.
Our voices. It can be intimidating going out to vote. But don't give up. There's always another option. You can request an absentee ballot for voting by mail if you go to vote.org. Register to vote today. Your voice matters. Our voice matters. Happy voting.
Thank you so much, Chantal. Thank you so much, Professor Galindo. I feel very filled with emotion right now, just spending the last 45 minutes watching these incredibly powerful videos and witnessing just how powerful, how strong, how passionate our first year writers are. So thank you. I want to echo Professor Galindo's appreciation for all of our panelists today, for all of our students who have shared their work. And I'm going to turn it over to Professor Hicks to introduce our distinguished guests.
Hi. So I'm really excited to get to talk about Dr. Mel Donaldson and Luis Rodriguez. I've got my book here, so if we can get books signed on Zoom, let's do that. I'm going to start with Mel, though, and I have some sort of prepared remarks. They're not very long. Mel Donaldson is a writer. He is a writer full stop, and he writes across genres. He writes books and poems and scholarship and plays and films. And I happen to know emails and memos. So if you need any writing done, you should get in touch with Mel. And for those of you who want to learn more about Mel's work, I did post the links to his website in the chat. After receiving his PhD from Brown University, Mel started teaching, and he taught at Bates College, UC Santa Barbara, Pasadena City College, UCLA, and Cal State L.A. in the English department. And that's where I met him. I had the privilege of working with Mel when we had a first year experience program. Mel was actually created the first year experience program, and I worked underneath him as his faculty coordinator. And he was just such an inspiration to me. His commitment to social justice was an honor to witness, but I think more important to me is that Mel cared about our students in a way that I have very rarely seen people in administrative roles care about students. He started the Men of Color Success Network. He ran a million cool events, and he was just a tireless advocate for our student community. And it was a great honor to work with him. He taught me how to be kind and decent, and yes, how even to be angry, because there are some situations that call for anger, right? And that was an important lesson. But I can also tell you that Mel is really funny, and I'm really, really thankful that he's participating in this event. I have met Luis Rodriguez in Chicano Studies class at Cal State L.A. with my book, and I was reading this book, and I actually went on to read it more than once. I think this is maybe the 4th or 5th time I've read it. And I read a lot of his other books. And I have even had the honor of teaching some of his poetry in my literary Los Angeles class. All semester we've been reading and enjoying Always Running, and it is really an honor to have such a celebrated guest today. But some things that we may not know is that after the book ends, his story doesn't end, it goes on. There are other books you can read, but one of the things that really goes on is his activism, you know? And I really do suggest that you read more of his work because it's really amazing. So I did come up with some things that you might not know about Luis Rodriguez. He writes children's books. I didn't know that. He was the official poet laureate of Los Angeles from 2014 to 2016, and reading his poetry is something that I can't recommend enough. He is the founding editor of Tia Chucha Press, which is now in its 30th year, and the co-founder and president of Tia Chucha's Centro Cultural and Bookstore in the San Fernando Valley, which is an amazing place. I mainly know it from the book festival. He works with Reverend Dr. William Barber's Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, and I hope we're going to get to hear more about that soon. And Luis's activism doesn't end with Always Running. He is a tireless advocate for our communities, and so many students have told me this semester, oh, I know who this guy is because he came and talked to my high school, and this is like the coolest thing ever. So to get him to come and talk to our classes is just a really wonderful gift. And he also works with some of our most vulnerable, important communities, including incarcerated youth. So I put his website in the chat too. I am beyond excited about this conversation. I want to extend my personal thanks, the thanks of the Cal State L.A. English department, and the thanks of my students to both of you for being here today. And I don't know, can we do the clap? We can't do the clapping hands thing because we can't all see each other. So I'm gonna clap, and then we should let Luis and Mel have a conversation, and then we'll have some time for questions and answers later. Okay.
Well, thank you very much, Jenny. Hello, good folks. Can you hear me okay? Okay, good. And if I freeze on you as we go through, I'll try to unfreeze as best I can. I'm on my old laptop here, which is working better than my new laptop. That's a totally different discussion. Yes, it's good to be here with Luis. Luis and I have known each other since the early 1980s. And at one point we were even roommates, and he was kind enough to cover a couple of months of rent for me, and that's why he keeps in touch, because I owe him money. But nonetheless, I love him nonetheless. But it's good to be here. And let me just say, being a part of the earlier part of the gathering and listening to and watching the work that you young scholars have done, it's very impressive, particularly under this this kind of time frame and environment where we can't necessarily be together and energize each other by being in the same room. But I thought that the videos you did and your perspectives about voting and the importance of it were very, very well done. So I'm glad I had a chance to observe that. I don't know if Luis wanted to comment at all. I think he was also watching the earlier hour and had a chance to reflect upon some of the things that you did.
Well, let me just say what a great work everybody did. I loved it. I loved the fact that you could use technology in such a way. We need to teach as we get active. You got to do both. Get active and teach and get active. And I think that this is very powerful. So thank you for all the presentations.
Yes, absolutely. Now, Jenny, did you want us to follow any particular direction in our discussion here, or how would you like us to proceed?
I was thinking, and Danielle, you can jump in here. I was thinking that we would let you guys talk about whatever you want to talk about for a little while. Then we do have some questions that I will put in the chat, and we could open for other questions. I mean, it's really up to you guys. Danielle, Todd?
I think that Jenny's plan sounds great. And so like she mentioned, we have 5 questions from students and some of our faculty. And so we're happy to begin with those or give you a little bit more time to chat with each other. The main theme that we're kind of trying to address with this seminar is how do we sustain political involvement in activism post-election? So our students have done a lot of work leading up to getting out the vote, but now that the vote is out, how do we sustain that involvement in activism post-election?
Okay. Well, let me make a couple of comments and then I'll toss it to Luis, and then maybe from there we can go into some of the questions that you have. Certainly, the past 4 years have revealed a number of things that all Americans should be conscious of. It, even those who try to hide and duck away. It's very difficult not to see the impact of political leadership and to realize that we have a certain kind of responsibility in terms of who become the political leaders. So I think that what you're presenting today is a way of stepping into a certain kind of responsibility that perhaps we don't see necessarily emphasized too much anymore. The fact that young scholars like yourself, your voice, your vote is as powerful as some of the older folks as I am. And I guess I would just try to encourage everyone to stay committed and to realize that the process can sometimes be slow in terms of the way in which certain issues, certain kinds of policies are put into place. But don't be discouraged. This discouragement is something that the opposition oftentimes likes to use as a way of, sort of smoldering and shutting out your voice. But always have your voice. And even as you articulate your position, as difficult as it may be, because certainly these days it is for me, I've become very almost homicidal over the last 4 years. You have to remember that not everyone will agree with you, okay? Not everyone will be on the same path that you're following. What you try to do is do what I call the best for the common good. And even those who may not agree with you will still benefit from that. You know, it's hard to understand how people, at least for me, can stand around and cheer a person who says, I'm taking away your health care, I'm taking away your Social Security, and I'm not giving you any money to basically pay your rent, as I gave all the corporations to pay their rent and buy a lot more. But that's where we are. We got about 70 million people in this country who just seem to be lost from my perspective, but they're still part of the country. So part of what you have to do is be committed to what you want to do, be ready and be firm in terms of what you believe and what you stand for. But at the same time, try to be as tolerant as possible to those who may not be up to your speed. And remember, this process, as I said, is a slow one, but it doesn't mean that you cannot transform, you cannot advance forward. But you have to be committed, and that commitment is not an overnight thing. It's an ongoing process. So I'm glad you all are voting, and I hope you will continue to be as active as you demonstrated in your work today. I'll toss over to Luis. Anything you want to throw out, Luis?
Yes, thank you, Mel. I wanted to say that I've been around a long time, just like Mel. We've been involved in these struggles for a long time, and when you get to have a little hindsight on things, you get to see, I see certain patterns. So one of them is, I think things are shifting in the direction of social justice more than it's ever been since I've been around. I see it move in that direction. I agree with Mel. When you got 70 million people voting for Trump, it means there's going to be a huge backlash. It's not going to be an easy struggle. But what I saw was, okay, around 2013, I hope I got the right year, George Zimmerman was acquitted of killing Trayvon Martin, and Black Lives Matter began to start mobilizing. One of my friends, Patrice Cullors, was one of the founders of Black Lives Matter. In 2014, I ran for governor, and she was actually part of my campaign. So I know her very well. She's a very important leader. It wasn't the talk of most people. Black Lives Matter, the social justice level, it wasn't. I brought in the 4 pillars of a strong, just society, which is, to have end poverty, to take care of the earth, climate change, all that, to make sure that there is no more war, and outside, but also the war insides and everything. And I don't know why I'm forgetting the 4th one, but we had 4 pillars that are about a just society. We were raising that when nobody else was doing it. When I ran for governor against Governor Brown, nobody was talking about this. But I found that over all those years, that dialogue has been expanding. As you know, Bernie Sanders himself took it as part of his campaigns, and others have been moving. So as the backlash has been organizing, there's been more strategic movement and shifting towards greater social justice. And I think it got really big when George Floyd was murdered, and that came out, and then everybody was talking Black Lives Matter. You know what I'm saying? Around the globe, everybody was talking social justice. Everybody was talking about even the defunding the police, and even ending mass incarceration. There was films and so much going on, like 13, and books that were coming out. People were beginning to see this. And I was just reading a magazine article about tipping points. We reached a tipping point where at least 25% of the population is getting this point, and probably more. We got a lot more work to do, but this is why I would say this is the time for vision, for strategies, for teaching, for getting out in all ways, including technology. I think every arena should be utilized. I don't think we should let any arena just be abandoned to the corporations or anybody else. We should utilize all of them. That was my argument when people say, why should I vote? Doesn't matter. They're all the same people. And I say, listen, man, I don't turn over nothing to the big corporations and these people money. I think we got to use all of it. The vote is important to fight for. And I'll just end with one thing. One of the reasons they can convince me is people were talking about fraud today, but they don't know what fraud is like. In Mexico in the early 80s, I was a journalist and I covered fraud. People were being killed. Ballots were thrown into rivers. Whole people were brought in from the fields with sandals and false credentials. I mean, there was people getting beat up. There was goon squads. When I was in Oaxaca during one of the big elections there, it was so kind of rage and fires and buildings were burning. It was a war just to have an election. But one thing I noticed, all the Zapoteco indigenous people were lined up with their beautiful huipiles, their blouses, but their hair all done indigenous. And the men with their campesino hats, all their best suits, their best clothing, lining up to vote. In the midst of all this madness, they were determined to use that vote. See what I'm saying? And I learned a lot from that. It's the struggle of the African Americans in the South for the vote, for Native Americans to be recognized, to be able to vote, for our own people to be recognized. Our own people being from Mexico, Central America, wherever they may come, to be recognized as legitimate members of this community, of this country. We need to use these things. These are powerful, important tools.
Okay, let me ask you this, Luisa. There's a question that that Jenny had suggested we might want to think about. How do you see writing and publishing as a way of being an activist? How do you sort of put that particular pursuit, that particular talent into that realm of being an activist?
Well, I think of myself as a revolutionary thinker and activist. And revolutionary in that I'm trying to get to the root of things, not just do things on the surface. Let's get to the root of why there's poverty, why there's oppression, why there's racial injustice. Get to the root of it. And that's what I mean. But I also say that I'm in an armed struggle. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not talking about guns. I'm not talking about bombs. And I'm not talking about beating people up. I'm talking about expanding the idea of arms. And for me, I learned this a long time ago. Poetry, writing, speaking, organizing, these are arms in the struggle for change. That we got expanded. What you showed, the videos, all these things are arms that we should utilize. People are always talking about whether we're going to have an armed revolution, armed struggle. I think we're having an armed revolution, but it's not going to be about guns. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm not, some people, so hopefully it never is about guns, you know, because I get that there's people with guns going against a lot of this movement, but I think that we got to keep using our voice and our minds and our physical ability to go out there and mobilize. We got to keep doing that. There's a moral fight for this country, and I don't think it's about left and right so much as what's right and what's wrong. And I think that we can say clearly, we know what's right. The goal that I'm for is the shared well-being of everybody. That is not the goal of the Trump's people. That is not the goal of Republicans. That may not even be the goal of the Democrats. That's my goal, the shared well-being of everyone. That's a big goal. That's a hard struggle. It's not something worth fighting for, because as long as we have gaps, we're always going to be needing to organize.
Yeah, and that's a good point. The whole idea of what is your goal individually, and how does your goal and the thing that you commit yourself to become the thing that drives you, and then how can you associate yourself with others who have maybe a similar goal and going in a similar direction. I think sometimes people who see themselves as artists or who might be labeled that way don't necessarily see themselves as being activists. And one of the things I always try to tell my young scholars is that there's no one way to be an activist. Mm-hmm. No, there's no one size that fits all. And so you find that thing, you find that pursuit, you find that that goal that connects to you and your talents, connects to you and where you might be in a certain point in your life intellectually in terms of your experience. And you put your all into that, and you try to find ways in which you connect with others who share, you know, same kinds of goals. So certainly, as Luis was just saying, poetry can be a weapon. Mm-hmm. Absolutely, nonfiction, plays, you know, mm-hmm. filmmaking.
You and me have done all of it, so we know.
I've done all.
Yeah, and one thing to point out is that it's a weapon because it's like a beacon. Mm-hmm. Artists can illuminate the way. It can show the imagination that people are talking about. They talk about reimagining community. Well, then maybe there's a illumination a road that we can show. This is where it's going. A good artist, all the arts, exactly what you're saying, can convey that thing. So it isn't just representative of where we're at now, which is one aspect, reflective of all the pain, the trauma, all this stuff, but it's also saying there's a way out.
Absolutely. You know, let's expand on that a little bit, because I don't know if all the scholars here know that basically Always Running, which came out, I think it was 1994, 1992, you recently turned into a stage play. Mm-hmm. And that you put it on. It was produced at Casa 01, I believe it is, over
0101 Theater in Boyle Heights, yeah.
And so in terms of bringing that particular play to life based upon a memoir, how did you update it mm-hmm. for a contemporary time of, was it 2019, I think?
Yeah.
It was on, as opposed to being the 1990s. How did you keep it relevant, I guess?
Well, one of the ways I wanted to emphasize the role of the mentor in my life. It's part of the Always Running story, but it's in there. I really wanted to emphasize that because that's always a need. Even now, 2019, 2020, we need mentors and guides and people to walk with us as we're learning who we are. What I learned from my mentor, who I call Chente in the book, wasn't so much, see, I was a very defiant, troubled young man who had one goal, to die for the barrio. That's not a good goal, but that's what I had. I was going to kill and die for the barrio. And that meant that I was willing to do whatever the body wanted. I had turned my life over to the homies, to the gang, whatever you want to call it, to la vida loca. So I was prepared to shoot heroin, because that's part of it, to shoot people if I had to go to jail. I wasn't scared of jail. People always ask me, well, how did you get scared straight? I said, I didn't get scared straight. What my mentor and others were able to do was I got cared straight. What they gave me was knowledge, awareness, connections that I didn't know I had. They saw something in me, a little genius that I didn't know I had in me. They saw a gift for art, for speaking, for all kinds of things, and they were guiding and building that. That's what I wanted to tell in the play, the importance of somebody, could be more than one person, who comes in your life, not to save you, but to give you the tools, the relationships, the resources you need to save yourself.
Yeah, yeah. And you bring up the whole idea of the mentor, and I think sometimes people think that the mentor has to be, someone who's graying and getting close to the wheelchair. But one of the things about the character of Chente in both the memoir and the play was that this was a young person, maybe he was a little bit older than some of the young folks he was trying to save, but nonetheless, he was bringing experience and basically trying to guide as opposed to trying to tell, young people what to do. So would you say that some of these young scholars here could be mentors? Is a particular age you have to reach to be a mentor or what?
No, I think once you begin to realize that you have a cause and you can, and that cause is big enough, bigger than yourself, then you can mentor others in that same direction. What a mentor does isn't so much try to get you out of trouble. He tries to connect with what you're passionate about, what you're about, what you care about. So what unites them is passion for passion. The mentor has the same work and passion for that subject, whatever it might be. And so that's what draws kids to certain mentors. Yeah. If I was interested in maybe sports, which I was doing it, but I wasn't that interested, a mentor would have been a coach. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I was more into the social justice struggle. I was more into how did you learn to speak this well? How did you learn to be disciplined to do the things that my mentor was only 10 years older than me. So you're right, he wasn't old, but he knew enough. He was further down the road that I wanted to be on.
Yeah, yeah. And that's a good point to keep in mind, and something for the scholars here to think about as they move forward, and commit themselves in a certain kind of direction. So, what would you say for you sort of moved you towards being committed to that certain goal of being an activist? Certainly, your memoir tells us some of the experiences that you had, some of the losses that you had of friends. But was there any particular episode, any particular event that sort of made you commit yourself in a certain kind of direction?
As you know, when you read the book, there's actually many of them, but I think the one that was most important for me is when I was 18, I was facing my first state prison term. And I was prepared to go to prison. I wasn't scared of any of it, but I didn't want to go to prison like I used to want to go. And now I wanted to go, again, like a revolutionary thinker. I wanted to be there as a revolutionary, which is different. But it also, because I was reading George Jackson and I was reading Malcolm X, I was reading people who came out of prison more learned and more wiser. And I said, well, if I'm going to prison, I'm going to go on my terms, not the terms of the prison gangs or any of that stuff, because I knew all about that. So when you start reading the newer memoir, It Calls You Back, it starts with me in the county jail trying to get off heroin. And I didn't get into that in Always Running, but it was very hopeful to start the new book with that. It's like, well, what happened? And because that's what my mentor, he wasn't there to show me how to get out of heroin or do it. He gave me enough awareness of myself and what was important that I made that decision. You see, I ended up owning my own liberation, which was important. And so I made a decision to not join the prison gang, to not get involved in prison politics, to get out of heroin, because I knew, not that I didn't like heroin people own you. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
You're not to anybody when you're in heroin. Nobody respects a heroin addict, you know what I'm saying, after a while. And I always thought when I was using that I would never be like a junkie in the corner, but the more I used, the more I was realizing I was falling right in that corner. And so I had to let it go, and it was the right thing. I've never gone back to heroin. And it turns out that my mentor and others wrote letters on my behalf, and they went to the judge, and they even showed up in court, which the judge at the time says nobody does that. I was facing a minimum of 6 years in prison. He gave me, because of everybody's concern, time served in the county jail. Did not give me the state prison term, which I never served. And I walked out there a different person. See what I'm saying? That was a very important tipping point for me personally. I was going to walk out, and I made a promise to myself, especially by the time my oldest son got born, when I was 20, that I would never go back to La Vida Loca and never go back to jail for crime. I would no more hard drugs and no more violence. And I kept that promise ever since. I might have had other issues, other problems, which you could read and it calls you back, but I was pretty much done. At 18 years old, which a lot of people, I go to prisons all the time. Sometimes they don't get it at 18. I was fortunate to get it at 18, 19, 20 years old.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's funny because my journey was a little bit different. I was so blessed to have this neighborhood, these friends, this family that supported me. I grew up in the South, segregated South, and somewhere around 1961, I guess I was about 9 years old. And we moved from Florida. I was born in Georgia, don't tell anyone. Trying to keep it out of my
No.
But we lived in Florida after my birth in Georgia, and we got out of the deep South, went north to Cape Cod because of some relatives who were there. And so what was happening at the time was that there was an NAACP that was established in New England, on Cape Cod in Hyannis, Massachusetts. And we got involved, we being me and my family, because that organization helped us to find housing. And so at the time, housing and employment were the major things that organization was dealing with in that new home that we had. And so I eventually became sort of the president of the youth group of the NAACP. And that's when mostly what we did as young folks is we got together and we did a lot of reading. And you mentioned Malcolm, you mentioned a list of folks there. And one of the things that were important at that time, because of the 60s, was knowing Black history. And so the NAACP and the youth group became one of those ways in which I began to know about who I was in connection with, my racial heritage and with a larger community of folks.
But she had a really good family. I knew your parents.
Yeah.
Great. So that helps.
It's
have a strong family. So that's good. I thought your parents were some of the finest people I ever knew. So
yeah. Definitely. I took that to college, that background, and I think the major turning point for me is my freshman year at Bates College. It was the spring of 1970. May 4th, 1970, changed my life. Kent State University. And that whole time in which students were, protesting about the war in Vietnam, and in particular, this gangster named Nixon had basically lied to Americans and said, well, we're not taking the war any further. We're not going into Cambodia. And yes, we were in Cambodia. And that's why the kids were protesting. And governor of Ohio, with Nixon's approval, called in a National Guard. And as some of you know, if not most of you, National Guard came in and they were armed, and they shot into protesters, students who were unarmed, and they killed 4 students and 4 young white students. And it was a revelation for me because I realized that, damn, if these white folks are going to kill their own kids, what the hell are they going to do to me, right? And that was May 4th. And then another, was it May 15th, that same month, Jackson State, a Black university in Jackson, Mississippi, protesting the war. And there were 2 young Black men who were shot by authorities. And so it was that month.
And let me just add, because people don't always do this, the Chicano Moratorium was that summer of 1970.
1970?
And 3 people were killed there because I was there. I was arrested and put on murder's roll during the whole the so-called riot that happened out of there. But then they killed 3 Chicano activists, including our hero, the Chicano journalist Ruben Salazar.
Yes.
Yeah. So it was a combination of the white students, the black students at Jackson State, and then these Chicanos, all protesting the Vietnam War being killed.
Yeah.
The war had come home, basically.
Yeah, and so it was for I think a lot of folks at our age, it was very easy to sort of step into being assertive and being an activist in regards to that particular issue of the war, which manifested many other things that were wrong in America at the time. And that's probably why I really began to step up and be a little bit more assertive and try to live that as well. And education allowed me to do that when I became a teacher in terms of sharing that with some of my students over the years.
So the times make who you are, and now we're in those kind of times.
Yeah.
I have a grandson and a granddaughter. My grandson's 28, my granddaughter's 23. I have 5 grandkids, but the 2 of them got active really strong in the last year during the protests for social justice and Black Lives Matter. One of them lives in North Carolina, the other one lives in New York City. But they're now activists. They're my grandkids. I love them. I didn't influence them. I just loved them. But they have moved in the same direction, which I'm very glad to see, that it's picking up another generation of leaders, of people who want to make change. And like you and me, trying to get the right avenues to do it where it's most strategic and most effective, not just I'm going to go burn down a few buildings, but I'm going to go out and do something effective in this world that actually make this change possible.
Right. Very true. Very true. And again, for the young scholars here, that's one of the questions to ask. One of the questions to think about in terms of, what's your next step beyond this class? What is it that you want to do? What is it you want to be committed to in terms of something that you feel you just must speak out about or support, or it could be several things, but to do your part for the common good, as I've said before, that becomes an important thing. Tia Chucha, Cultural Center.
Yeah.
Okay. What motivated you to sort of move in that direction, and how did you wind up out in Sylmar area?
So I was in Chicago, as many of you know, if you read my work, for 15 years. I did a lot of work in Chicago, going to prisons, work with the homeless, work with gang members. As you know, my son, which is part of the story, got involved with gangs. Mel knows him very well when he was small and up to later, and ended up doing 15 years in prison. It's sad when your own kids get involved in that. And it was very hard for me to pull them out. By then, the gang violence, crack, and drugs have got worse. It was really bad in the 60s and 70s because I was in the middle of it. But now it extended. Everybody was doing it. Now, as you know, even now, fentanyl and all these other drugs, crystal meth is everywhere. Every community is impacted. So my son, when he went to prison, I have 2 other sons and a daughter. I didn't want to lose any more kids. And I talked to him. He was in prison. I said, I'm going to move my kids back to L.A. Not that L.A. is better than Chicago. I'm going to tell you, L.A. and Chicago are the 2 gang capitals of the country. But one good thing about L.A. is I had family here. I didn't have any family in Chicago. And I thought, again, I need to go back to family. And that's what we did. Me and my wife, we brought my sons, my 2 sons, and then my daughter came and joined us. And we were here. And we moved in the San Fernando Valley because my wife grew up in Pacoima, in one of the poorest communities in all of LA County. She grew up in this barrio. She grew up with 11 siblings. She was part of the migrant stream when they settled there. And they're known for having all these kids in a rough neighborhood with housing projects, gangs, drugs, and not one of them, all the 11 kids, got involved with gangs or drugs. They're actually known for that. There's 2 families that everybody talks about in Pacoima that had all these kids. That one had 13 kids and none of them got involved with gangs or drugs. So in many ways, they were their own gang, I guess. They were their own little army. But my wife came back. And so that's the family I really want to connect with because they're big, they're good. And they been good to my sons and to my daughter when she was here. She's back in Chicago now. She lives there with 2 of my other grandkids, but my sons are still here. And it was good for that. It was important for them to connect with family. But once I got here, here's what my wife noticed. nothing had changed in the Northeast San Fernando Valley. It was culturally barren. There was nothing going on. There was no bookstores for the second largest Mexican community outside of East LA in the whole country. There was no bookstores. There was no art galleries. There was no cultural centers. And me and her were active in Chicago with all these things. So I was getting some good money from what was running with some royalties and the advance that I had made. And instead of, I tell people, instead of buying a swimming pool like some people do, or a Lexus, which I don't care about, we put it all in Tia Chuchas. We created Tia Chuchas out of the money that Always Running gave me. It was my way of giving back, my way of helping to continue the struggle that I learned 50 years ago. And it's been growing ever since. Tia Chucha Centro Cultural, by the way, I think you got on the chat the website, or if you don't, you should be there. tiachucha.org. It's got now virtual classrooms, virtual talks, virtual open mics. It's got a virtual Celebrating Words Festival. It's got indigenous cosmology. We do Mexica danza. We do now what language courses. We teach music, dance, theater, writing. We teach guitar. We have all these amazing classes. We serve like 18 to 20,000 people a year. And now we're even in the pandemic, we actually did better selling books virtually than we did when the bookstore was open on a regular basis. We've just opened up the bookstore in restrictive hours. So it's going very well. I'm very proud of it. And just have to add one other thing. Me and my wife have been running it for about 17 years. She did most of the work. I have to be honest with you, Trini. She ran it as the executive director. I was getting all the outreach grants and I was getting all the money, whatever we could. But 2 years ago, we turned it over to these young people. Some of them have been with us since they were in high school. Now they're in their mid 30s, late 20s, late 30s, and we turned it over. There's 8 part-time and full-time staff for young people now running Tia Chuchas. It's in their hands. I mean, when she's on the board, my wife, and I help any way I can. They come to us for guidance and when there's issues, but it belongs to them. And I think that's what's important, to engender new leaders, engender new people who can take on these issues. And me and my wife, we can move on to other things, but we left it in their hands so that it would continue. It would have longevity and continuity. The other thing I want to mention is, because it brought up in the chat, is me and my wife were also active in the Poor People's Campaign that the Reverend William Barber out of North Carolina helped bring out. And as Mel knows, it started with Martin Luther King Jr. in the late in the 60s, and it got very big until his death, until his murder. And then it began to kind of flounder, and it pretty much didn't go anywhere. But he was at a precipice. I think his death was the catalyst for it changing. But he was at the precipice of bringing poor whites, of bringing Native Americans, of bringing Chicanos, Puerto Ricans, and African Americans, all kinds of people together against poverty, which is a very big issue. And he was murdered. But we have continued that. The Poor People's Campaign, you can look them up at poorpeoplescampaign.org. The big title, but poorpeoplescampaign.org. You can see on their website all the campaigns they're doing, all the states that are doing things, how to connect, how to find information. There's a whole paper on the poverty in this country that they've done. There's got a lot of facts and figures, data and everything. I recommend you get involved with these kind of organizations because they're taking on the systemic nature of our oppression and the injustices that we face.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that really led to the demise of King, was the fact that he was bringing people together along the lines of economic challenges.
It was a dangerous, some people thought this was a dangerous thing what he was doing.
In the capitalist society, to start pointing the finger with who the real villains are, and it's not necessarily racist. It has to do with other kinds of things, power and sustaining power and keeping it and emphasizing difference. I guess I'm sort of looking at the clock here. I know some of the students may have some questions that they want to ask, but since I have you out in Sylmar now, let me just ask you one more thing in terms of your activism. I think you have been very involved with some of the incarcerated youth out that way. And could you speak to that a little bit in terms of how you've been involved with sort of addressing some of the needs of talking to some of the incarcerated population, both the younger as well as the older?
Well, one thing that I did, since I didn't do the state prison terms that a lot of my homies did, I was in jails, and I was in 2 adult facilities, and then I was in juvenile hall. But I didn't do that. I never forgot any of them. I never forgot that they were going. So when I was about 25 years old, I was offered an invitation to teach creative writing at Chino Prison. And I was already a journalist by then. I was working at San Bernardino Sun, and Chino Prison is part of San Bernardino County. So it worked out very well. And I didn't realize that this was going to be a 40-year-long journey. I have been going to prisons ever since, teaching creative writing over years, but also coming in for one-time poetry readings, talks, and/or healing circles. I've gone up and down the state. I've gone to 18 other states. And because of my reputation, I've been fortunate to go to Mexico, Central America, South America, and England and Italy in prisons, institutions there. So the main thing about this population, which as people know, is I don't believe that punishment is a way to address crime or trouble or trauma. I think there's got to be other ways. There are other ways, transformative or restorative justice things. There's treatment. There's health care needs. There's a lot of rehabilitation could be done. Arts, I think, are very fundamental to help change people. I believe all these people can change. Doesn't mean they all will change, but they all can. And I think that's the emphasis now, because some of you know, in this county, LA County, we got Measure J passed. Measure J is not the most comprehensive best thing going, but it did do something that we had never done before. It acts that 10% of the county budget be used for rehabilitation, treatment, and helping youth who are in trouble. And I think that's the beginning of some of what we're saying. There was a time when I used to talk this stuff and nobody give me the time of day. Now we're starting to hear a little openings. It's not, and again, it's not the end all be all, but it's the beginning to keep pressing for more of these things and get rid of what I call, I'm an abolitionist. I would like to get rid of the whole mass incarceration system.
Yeah, I think a lot of folks are sort of challenging that now. At the very least, it has to be transformed. I think it was back in the spring of 2015 or maybe 2014. A good friend of mine, Renford Reese, was teaching at Cal Poly Pomona, and he was going into Chino Hills, the facility there, and asked me if I would teach a class that, they had someone to teach it, and then that person stepped out. It was a film class, and I was using film to talk about race relations and issues of family and other topics. And it was a very sobering experience, walking in and into the facility and walking across the yard and seeing the inmates there and being sort of housed in this one little building, in this room, but had about 30 people when we started. Mm-hmm. But it was very enlightening too, to the fact that a lot of those inmates, they were reading, they had perspectives, they were articulate. Many of them just had a situation where they made one bad error, and because of economics or because of race, they found themselves on the wrong end of quote unquote justice. There's one kid there who was only about 23, 24, and he just happened to be in a car one night with some friends who decided they were going to do a drive-by, and he was found as guilty as the one who pulled the trigger. And he was doing 25 years. And so I'm glad I did it. And it was one of those things that, really opened my eyes to some things about myself and attitudes that I had, but also the fact that you don't give up on people. And as you said, some people, they are who they are, but a lot of people are worth saving.
Absolutely. And that's my experience. And again, I feel bad because I was at Lancaster State Prison teaching for now 13 years when the pandemic came, and I have not been able to return. And it's sad. Some of the guys, I'm still doing lesson plans for them. We did a video for the DirecTV circuit thing, but I don't know what's happening to these guys. The communication is not happening. They don't get no visits. COVID, as you know, is spreading out in the prison system. So I feel really bad. I hope they say that after July of next year, we might come back. But it's really rough right now for these guys and women, because I was going to CIW, the women's prison, as well.
Okay. Well, I think we have a number of questions. We were talking here. I didn't see the number going up here. Feel like answering a few questions, Luis?
Well, I just saw one about El Salvador, which I think is very important. I
Okay.
was they were talking about the prisons in El Salvador, and I've been to 10 prisons in El Salvador and one juvenile facility. I will have to say that I've been going to El Salvador for 25 years, and I was working with the Maras when they first were being deported down there from LA. And of course, they spread out all over Central America. I've gone to Guatemala and gone to prisons there, and I've also done work in Honduras. Me and my wife were in Honduras for a month, working in with abandoned girls. Because there's 250,000 abandoned kids and only one home for girls. Can you imagine? 60 girls. It's really horrible. But the people are amazing. The kids are great. And I went into these prisons, and I will say that, again, we think we know how bad prisons are. We have no idea. When you go to Mexico, Central America, the prisons are nothing like here. They are complete hellholes. Um, I was in El Salvador where they had cells for like maybe 4 guys that had 20 to 30 guys in them for years, for years. The prisons with no potable water, no electricity. So at night, everything's completely dark. There was prisons with women who had kids, and because they had nobody to take care of them, the kids were raised in the prison with the women. The kids are there with the women day in and day out, unable to get out. There's a lot of things you don't know about how bad things could be. And I would say that most people, even there, want rehabilitation, treatments, resources, jobs. They want opportunities. There's none there, especially in those countries, because they have no jobs. The poverty is great. And unfortunately, this has led to a lot of criminal extortion, drug, crime things that have led to a lot of violence and pain in those countries. But we're contributing to it. People who know anything about El Salvador, Guatemala, the gangs that really caused problems there were the gangs that started in LA, they got deported. And I know because I was there in 93 when the deportations were really, it started in 92. It really got big. And I went down there a year later to meet with all these La Vida Loca guys. We talked to old Calo from the street. They were tattooed like all of us were tattooed in the 60s and 70s. And they had the cholo style, you know, I mean, nowadays it may not be that now, but they were all cholo like I was a cholo. So we related very well. And it's really funny. They thought I was an OG Chicano guy in 93. So they treated me cool because at that time, being an OG Chicano was cool. I don't know if it matters now, you know, they probably could give a hoot if I came down there. And, you know, but I will say that one time I did go to one of the worst prisons. It was a MS-13 prison because they separate MS-13 from 18th Street and other gangs. And so I went in there, and there was a guy who was one of the founders of MS-13. He was a part of what was called the 7-Eleven Mara Salvatrucha, 7-Eleven, because they started in around the parking lot of a 7-Eleven store in Pico Union, and they were actually the first set of the MS-13. He was one of the founders, and he was there in prison. Well, he knew who I was. He had read Always Running and everything. So he showed up as a Pachuco. He came in there with a little Pachuco hat, the suspenders, the long, beautiful iron pants, the shirt. He had made it in prison, all this clothing. And he had respect for me. It was beautiful. But again, I don't know how much that impacts people. Things change so fast, and it may not mean anything. But in those days, at least there was a connection, and I made those. So yes, it's a good question about, and again, El Salvador, Guatemala, Mexico, Central America, they need a lot of help and resources. I will have to say that I hate to say this, but the worst prison I ever went to wasn't even there. It was in Mexico. It was in where I was born, in Chihuahua. Not where I was born. My family's from. I was born in El Paso, but we were part of the Chihuahua Desert. My family's from there, and it was the worst, scariest story. And you'll read it in my new book. By the way, I have a book of essays called From Our Land to Our Land, and I have an essay on my work in prisons, and it ends with what happened to me in this prison in Mexico, which was really rough, but it turned out good at the end. But anyway, just to let people know, people should know how bad the situation is in those countries.
Yeah. Well, there's a question that sort of maybe overlaps with some of the things we've talked about, but it may be one that might be useful for the scholars here. The question has to do with the fact that there's so many organizations that are out there that are, have certain kinds of goals and are active in one way or the other. What would you suggest in terms of, choosing a certain kind of direction to go? How do you connect with an organization to find out what they're doing and how you can be perhaps a part of it. Any
Well, I
suggestions?
can tell you about the connections that I am tied with, because I'm sure there's a lot of ways to go. Through Tia Chuchas, you'll find a lot of activists. Over these years, we've trained revolutionary, radical-minded, strategic thinking leaders. They're now running this place, but they're also extending it to others. And one of the things too is we started a Black and Brown Alliance for Justice, which is now all over South Central and part of Pico Union, parts of East LA, and now in this part of the Valley, because of the effort to bring our Black and Brown communities together, because we actually are together. Where most Black and Brown communities in LA are like in Pacoima or Watts or Compton, they're Black and Brown communities, and we've been living together for a long time. And as you know, as they kill a lot more Blacks disproportionately, right next to underneath it is the disproportionate number of brown people killed, especially in LA. So we were coming together. I also have this thing called Alliance United, which is 50 organizations in the Valley, all organizations, including nonprofits, including people who are not nonprofits, including some churches. We're working with a big, large group of people that every month, me and my wife help train them, teach them, and they go out and do stuff. Alliance United is getting very big. We've been doing it for over a year, but during the pandemic, it got even bigger. We got more people involved. So I can tell you the things that I'm involved with. And again, the Poor People's Campaign, I really recommend getting involved. It's a national thing, but there's state, local groups you can take part in locally. I would recommend those organizations.
Okay, okay. Let me see if I can grab another question here for us so we can, get some of the students' voices in here. Going back to the Chicano Moratorium, the 50th anniversary of it this year. Did you participate in that, Luis? I don't, you may have.
No, and you know what happened? I was invited because people know my story. I'm very close friends with Rosalio Munoz, who was the chairman of the Chicano Moratorium at the time that the moratorium in 1970 was really going big. But I wasn't able to be involved, unfortunately. There was with all the things that's going on with the pandemic and everything, I'm pretty much been busy with Zoom calls, and I mean, I've been doing virtual events like 4 or 5 a day, so which is good. I don't even mind. I'm not zoomed out yet, but I mean, yeah, but I got really busy. But also, I'm writing again, and somebody mentioned there's a question about writing. I'm trying to do TV streaming. This is something that Mel knows about. A TV streaming show of Always Running and It Calls You Back. The combination of the two memoirs. I've been pitching it. I pitched it to Showtime, FX, and a couple other places. But right now, we're just waiting to hear what they might do or might not do. It's very hard in Hollywood, as Mel can tell you even more. Even with the openings they have now, with more Blacks and more Browns and more women, it's still a long ways to go. And one of the things that we're realizing is we have to keep breaking down these doors. They're not easy, but we got to keep doing them. So I'm trying to see if that's where I'm putting a lot of efforts. So I didn't go to the moratorium, unfortunately, the commemoration, but I did honor that 50 years because it was a very important part of my life, but it also helped in the whole country. I had a big talk with these anti-war activists in Washington, D.C., where they were talking about the beginnings of the anti-war struggle, and they wouldn't mention Jackson State or Chicano Moratorium. They didn't mention the Black and Brown people who were active in the anti-war struggle. And I made a big talk. My good old friend, the late Tom Hayden, said, you got to talk, you got to straighten these people out. And I did. And they were mostly white people, good people. I ain't got no issue with them, but they were forgetting our contribution, the people of color, the working class communities of color that also stepped out. And I told them, you should never, ever forget the Chicano Moratorium. You should include it in all your proceedings. I get it, Kent State, all the marches and everything, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you made a good point about, where things are right now in what is called Hollywood. We're seeing more faces of color in front of the camera, even in commercials, because commercials are trying to sell product to anybody. They don't care. But we still, as Lin-Manuel Miranda said, we still can't get inside the room,
We're not controlling it. It's still in the hands of other people. And I'll tell you a horror story, because I just had an argument with somebody about it. They were arguing to me that Hollywood isn't racist. I know it's a weird thing.
Okay.
It happened to be a friend of mine. She's white, but friend of mine. So I'm not gonna jump on. I'm not, get all mad. No. But I did want to point out, okay, because she was saying a lot of it is an economic decision, and I go, well, you don't understand. The economic decisions are predicated and rooted in racism. It doesn't seem like a racism. And I'll tell you an example. I had an agent in Hollywood, Paradigm, which is one of the big ones.
Yes,
and she came to me, and I've never known she was racist, never heard her say a bad thing, never. She came to me offering millions of dollars from a studio to do Always Running. Now, it would have benefited me. I would have made more money than her. She would have got 20% or whatever it was. But here is the kicker. It took her a while to finally tell me. I said, what are you talking about? To me, $1 million is an abstraction. I don't know what that means. I just want to know what are we talking about? And she finally said, okay, fine. They actually want to do with the studio. I don't even recall. She didn't tell me what it was, but she said they wanted to make all the characters white. Now, this other lady was arguing, well, see, it wasn't a racist thing. It's just an economic thing. White people go to the movies. White people, it's about them. They make. And I go, okay, it's an economic decision. She probably is not a racist in that she's not prejudiced. She was going to benefit me economically. I get that. But here's what she didn't understand. What an insult it was to me and my culture and my people. What an insult it was to say that you would make my story white people. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. She didn't get the sensitivity that's needed to make sure our stories get told rightfully. And I think this is an ongoing issue. They've always... in the 50s, there was a movie called From Here to Eternity with Tab Hunter, the great hero. He was doing a true story of a guy that I think imprisoned or was able to round up more Nazis than any other soldier. Turns out that that guy was a Chicano, Guy Garbadon, but they made a Tab Hunter, the blonde hair, blue-eyed guy. They made him Guy. They made him the hero. They could not make it a Mexican for the life of them. You know what I'm saying? And so my thing is, oh yeah, okay, it sounds like great. It's all economic, but guess what? Underneath it, it's my story is being pushed aside, and that's the problem. We don't control these decisions.
Yeah, it's all about the decision making and who has the control. Absolutely, absolutely. Before I read another question here, does anyone here want to ask a question based upon the last few moments? I don't want to leave anyone out because Luis and I can sit here and talk for another hour or so.
Oh yeah, we have a lot to talk about, me, Mel.
Anyone wanted to chime in here before I grab another question? Okay. So here's one which you sort of alluded to already in terms of your latest book. Matter of fact, you were at Pasadena at what's the bookstore in Pasadena, Luis? We were there.
Oh, Romans.
Yeah.
Great bookstore. Great bookstore.
And I understand that they're having some challenges economically right now. But how has the book done, that particular book, since appearing there? That would have been back in, was it the summer of 2019?
When my newest book came out? It actually came out in February of this year.
February this year.
Talk about bad timing. Because we had plans to go to Houston, to Washington, D.C., to New York, to the Bay Area, Seattle, San Diego, and all of it got canceled. I did not do the book tour. I actually got reviews from everybody, good reviews, Library Journal, Kirkus Review, got the the LA Times did a whole book of the month thing. It was great. It was going to break out. Pandemic came, everything went down. So I recommend you get the book anyway. Get it wherever you can, but I would recommend it at tiachucha.org/bookstore, because we do have a bookstore. We sell a lot of books to the bookstore, and it helps us if you get it there. But yeah, it was sad because it was my first book of essays, and I have 16 books with all genres, as you know. Some have done really good, some have done not too good, but I love all of my books and they're all important and I want to keep writing. But this book is especially important now because a lot of things we're talking about now, especially with the social justice risings up, my book was articulating and trying to talk about all this as well. There's a whole mess of stuff about race, identity, and class in this book. Also, it comes from an indigenous cosmology. As Mal knows, I've been doing a lot of native spiritual practices. That's what I do. it's connected me with Reverend Barber, who's open to all that stuff, but also to, I mean, the amazing Christians who are radical Christians out there, as well as to a lot of the Native American community. I am Native from my mother's roots. My mother is Tarahumara from Chihuahua. That's why Chihuahua is important. The Tarahumara is a major tribe there. My mother has roots with that. I've been down there. I've been to the Copper Canyon. I've been to the Sierra Tarahumara. I've met them. I have friends there. And they've kind of adopted me, which is good, even though I've not been able to come back. But I also got adopted. My family, with my wife Trini in particular, was adopted by this Navajo elder in Arizona over 20 years ago. So we've learned a lot from them, and we've done ceremonies there, and the family treats us as family. They adopted my wife and everybody else along with it. So I do this spiritual Native American stuff. So in my book, I'm speaking as a Native person. You know, I mean, that's how I want to speak to America.
All right. Well, there was a question here for both of us about, you know, in terms of what we've written, in terms of any films, what are our favorites, and which is a tough one for me to respond to because all of them are my favorites. I think that everything I've written has been brilliant, but don't pass that. So no, there's a book I did back in 2003 on you know, Black directors in Hollywood, which sort of addresses some of the things we were mentioning before about you know, the power brokers in Hollywood. But it was a historical look at some of the directors who have come along, you know, particularly since the 1960s, and that was a really great accomplishment. A lot of research, but I enjoyed that.
People may not know that you're a filmmaker and you've also written plays and you've got a lot of other good stuff out there.
Yeah, you know, and it's funny because when I usually go out, I'm usually wearing a T-shirt that says I'm a filmmaker. I've written books. Some people can't read, you know. But yeah, I'm currently working on a film now, which is a documentary, which is rather interesting in that my partner and I, who's directing the film, we got involved in it, not knowing much about the topic, and the topic is vaccines. Nor did we know that we would be finishing it up at just this particular time. But we're very proud of it. We're editing now. It'll be about a 50-minute documentary. Don't know exactly where it's going to be streamed at yet. We're not into the whole promotion of it, but there's some talks about Hulu and Urban One. But when I get that information, I'll pass it along to the professors, pass along to the students via email. But one of the things that we found is that as filmmakers, we went into this project as we talked to the executive producers, who are both white, and we wanted to do a film about how the medical field and Black and Latino communities have in some ways been injured over the years due to science and the reluctance of Black and brown folks to, you know, to step up to take a vaccine. But what we wanted to do was to present that whole issue by showing some of the folks who are anti-vax, and there are a heck of them out there. And in the middle, you have some naturopathic doctors, some more perhaps down to earth than others, but they emphasize diets and food that you eat, your environment, and then to have pro-vax people on, and there are quite a few of those out there. But one of the things we found, the politics of it, is that a lot of the pro-vax people would not agree to be interviewed. We had 5 people lined up, and out of the 5, only one, you know, finally said, yes, you can interview me on film. And so what we have now is what's going to look like an anti-vax film, which was not intended, but it's just, we had the politics of both sides that were making our film sort of take a certain kind of direction. But we're very proud of what we did. And as I said, the running title of it now is Medical Racism, which was not our choice. But it does start with looking at Sims and the 19th century, and looking at going to the 20th century, issues of course, Tuskegee, polio, MMR, measles, mumps, rubella. We have a film crew that filmed in Africa. My partner went and interviewed people in Florida, Texas, Minneapolis, and the Somali community there. And it's very comprehensive for a 50-minute film, but I hope people will find some value in it. As I said, when we finally get to having it ready the first part of January, I'll let folks at Cal State know, and then maybe can get that information out.
Yeah, people may not know, but for Black and Brown people, we do get hard. In my own family, I have an uncle who became blind because of chickenpox. Should not have been gone blind, but those days when you're poor and Mexican, you didn't get any help. I have a sister who died when she was an infant from diarrhea. Diarrhea is treatable, but when you have diarrhea in Mexico, you're dead. It's a death sentence. You know, and I also have another sister, my oldest sister, who had twins, and she went into a hospital in El Paso, which has now been closed down, that was part of the child trafficking world. One of her twin daughters was taken away from her, and she never could find them again. And so I have a niece who's, you know, out there in the world with no twin that she was born with. These are stories that people don't realize is very, unfortunately, too many of them in the Black and Brown communities, the poor communities. These are stories that still exist today. When you think all this healthcare, all this technology, people still go through these kind of things.
Yes, in 1990 to 1992, there was, and LA Times did a series of articles on this that we used for the doc, but the CDC, allowed some experimental vaccines to be used, and they targeted two communities, Compton and East LA. And they didn't go into Beverly Hills, and why. And coming out of that particular period, there were some families who were injured, unfortunately, in terms of how kids came down with all kinds of various side effects that changed their lives. So yeah, unfortunately, that history is there, and it's a sad history, but one that people should know about, and hopefully be better informed, particularly coming into the COVID-19 vaccine era beginning yesterday, I guess, in England, and it, in the States, it'll be until we get into the early part of the summer until everyone is vaccinated. That is, those who want to be. So yeah, there's a lot out there to discover and to explore, and there's a lot that needs attention and some activism. So hopefully folks will find a way, you young scholars, to be involved. Let's see. I'm looking at the clock. Jenny, do you have a final question you want us to challenge here or to respond to?
Yeah, I actually would like to hear what advice you guys would give first-year students, people who are just starting college. This is a real weird time to be starting college. They're starting college in a rather non-traditional environment. What would you tell them?
Well, go ahead, Mel. Go ahead.
Well, there are some things that are required by the university in terms of the things you need to know. That the first thing to do is to be informed about what it is that's happening on your campus. Know as much as you can about those particular classes or areas of concentration that you have to follow in order to get to your major, and make sure you don't get caught up in some of the lack of information that sometimes can be on a campus like Cal State L.A. and other campuses. But I think the other thing too is in trying to be informed is learning how to take, again, responsibility for your own education. Unlike previous years in secondary school, where people sort of lead you by the hand, you may not find that situation, nor should you have that kind of situation on a college or university level. Find out who your allies are. Who are those professors who you feel are fair and supportive and are presenting in their classes as you look at syllabi and as you look at methodology, who are presenting perhaps a semester that's going to allow you to grow and to read and to experience something new. Try to know some of those upperclassmen that you might run across who can certainly give you some idea about how to navigate the campus, the go-to places, the places to avoid, people to avoid, all of those things. But it is the best way to educate yourself about a campus is to educate yourself about a campus. Ask questions, find allies, and take responsibility for your education, and know as much as you can in regards to what area you think you're going to move into as a major, and what are the requirements for that major. And as you go along, what do you want to do, after you finish at the university? Because some of the things you decide to do at Cal State L.A. May be determined by where you want to go once you finish up at Cal State L.A.
Yeah, and all I can say is ditto. Mel knows this better than I do, but I do want to say that it's about owning your own education. Don't let any barrier get in the way. I learned one thing in the 60s is that, the system is responsible for a lot of our pain and trauma and barriers and everything. But one thing I learned, if you give up, that's on you.
Yeah.
And activists taught me that, and it was good because I always knew I'm going to fight a lot of barriers. I'm going to lose a lot of battles, but I can't give up. And none of you should give up your education, no matter what's going on. Keep learning, keep going out there. Self-education, but also whatever opportunities exist, use them. This is a bad time, but don't let it stop you. Own your education.
Absolutely. And don't be afraid of a particular course, particular class, because it may be hard or difficult or challenging. Sometimes those are the classes that allow you to grow the most. If you have some sort of technical deficiency as I do, and finding all this Zoom and gatherings and virtual gatherings a little challenging, then reach out to those classmates, and you've probably seen some here on this meeting who seem to know their way around. Talk to them and find out some of the ways in which you need to keep in mind, sort of navigating this kind of virtual learning. But it's all about, as Luis said, educating yourself and taking responsibility, and allowing yourself to grow and deal with those difficulties that have come along. It'll make you stronger, make you better. Anything else you want us to add to that, Jenny?
I just want to thank you both so much. This is such an amazing thing for me, and I feel like you really fed my soul listening to you talk. I'm just really, really grateful, and thank you.
Well, I want to thank you all, and thank you, Mel.
Yeah.
For making this happen. And me and Mel gonna talk some more. Our talks are actually more interesting, but we're not gonna let you in on it. But anyway, thank you all. Thank you for letting me be here.
Good to see you, Luis, and to spend some time with you. And good to meet you scholars, you young scholars who are, as I said, doing some good work. And from what I hear as we went around, you also have some pretty sharp professors as well. So take advantage of them and make them earn their money by giving you some time to answer some of your questions, okay? But thank you very much for the invitation. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Luis and Mel. So we came here today to think about all the ways that we, and especially our students, can affect the changes we want to see in this country. Like, what can we do to be activists for the issues that matter to us, and how can we connect across generations of activism? And you both were a really vital part of that conversation. So I just can't thank you enough for being here with us. We're going to close out in just a few minutes, but I really wanted to take a couple moments to thank the people who made this event possible, because it truly did take a village. So to begin with, thank you again to all of our student presenters, our distinguished guests, Mr. Luis Rodriguez and Dr. Mel Donaldson, to all of the students in our first year writing classes who worked this semester to get out the vote, and to those of you in the audience today who shared a couple hours of your afternoon for conversation on these important topics. I also want to thank our campus partners, especially our university library. Paige Stuthoff, our humanities librarian, she created this amazing voter resource guide for use in all of our first year writing classes, and Kelsey Brown, our library's event coordinator, who helped us to promote and organize the event. Thank you, of course, to our department leadership, our fearless chair, Dr. Linda Greenberg, our assistant chair, Dr. Maria Carafilas, for their support of this curricular initiative. We wouldn't really have been able to do this without that support. and Dr. Karafilis especially for her collaboration on the first class assignment, that Get Out the Vote video. That was actually conceived of by the American Communities Program. We have an amazing student assistant, Bailey Canham, for her work on the website Voting 101. This provides information on voter resources and has published several of our students' projects. And then finally, I want to extend a very sincere thank you to our amazing teaching associates who gave their time and their creative energies over the summer to help build the curriculum for these courses, and who work just in a tireless and dedicated, supportive way to teach and, most importantly, empower our first-year students. So the vote is out, but it clearly doesn't end here. We still have work to do, and a lot of it. So I hope this semester will inspire our first-year students in particular to consider the ways that they can really use their research and their writing, their voices, to help shape our US political landscape. Thank you again, everybody, for coming.
All right. Take care.